Well, here we are, 15 movies later, and we're finally at the end of the Showa era. The final film in the Showa era is Mechagodzilla's Counterattack, as it's known in Japan, or Terror of Godzilla for some reason, its original US release, and then eventually Terror of Mechagodzilla. Let's go.
Hey everybody, thanks for watching. I'm Jared Fearing,
I'm a lifelong Godzilla fan and a big fan of Halloween.
and nothing says Halloween like monster movies.
So this year, for the month of October,
We're going to review every single Godzilla movie, from Gojira all the way to Godzilla and Kong the New Empire.
so join me this month for a new video every single day and see if I go insane in the process. Let's get to it. Terror of Mechagodzilla is one of the oddest films in the entire Showa series because it is a direct sequel to Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla. The only other movie that is arguably a direct sequel is Godzilla Raids Again, and that's one of those movies that we talked about earlier with continuity where it's like kind of iffy. It's kind of a sequel, but not really. Whereas here, it is literally a direct sequel. Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla ends with Mechagodzilla being blown up and thrown into the ocean, and Terror of Mechagodzilla begins with a submersible searching for Mechagodzilla's discarded head. The English version opens with a montage of scenes from the entire Showa era that's about 10 minutes long. It's pretty in depth. It shows a lot of key moments from the Godzilla franchise, and they go about painting Godzilla as a villain first, and they show him destroying cities in movies where he definitely was not the villain. But that's fine because they do eventually come out and say straight up that he is now a protector and a hero. So they really make it clear that Godzilla was a villain, and now he's basically helping the humans as a good guy. So this is one of the only movies where they explicitly state their relationship with Godzilla too. So in that sense, it is also unique. The recap lasting for about 10 minutes is a little bit egregious because the movie itself is only an hour and 28 minutes long. So you're taking up a significant amount of time for footage that, again, we've already seen. But like I've mentioned in previous films, if you're not actively watching these movies back to back, you might not notice it so much, so maybe it's not that big of a deal. In the American version, they consistently refer to the new kaiju, Titanosaurus, as a dinosaur. And, whatever, it's kind of fun, I guess. He's clearly not a dinosaur. He's Godzilla-sized, he's got all kinds of fins, he's got some wind power with his tail for some reason, but they keep referring to him as a dinosaur, and I enjoy that, even though it's really nonsensical and kind of an odd choice, but sure, whatever. He's a dinosaur as big as a skyscraper. I love him, Titanosaurus. The design of Titanosaurus is really cool. I really like him. He kind of is reminiscent almost of like a Chinese style of dragon in the face. They've given him that long snout, and he's red, which is kind of cool. Titanosaurus is also the name of an actual dinosaur, by the way, but the actual dinosaur is more like a Brontosaurus or Brachiosaurus. It's a sauropod with 4 legs on the ground, long neck and tail. Not at all like the Titanosaurus we see here, which, whatever. Again, that's fine. This movie is much more about Titanosaurus than it is about Godzilla or Mechagodzilla. For a movie that's trying to capitalize on the success of Mechagodzilla, calling it Terror of Mechagodzilla or Mechagodzilla's Counterattack, there sure is not that much Mechagodzilla. He basically only comes back at the end, and at this point he's under control by a female robot hybrid cyborg girl, and I don't know, he kind of... There's almost like no emotion in his resurrection, whereas in the first movie, they gave him kind of like an evil character. When he was still dressed up as Godzilla, you can see that he's like frowning as he's pulling Angus's face open. I don't know, there was just something is kind of lost by this version of Mechagodzilla, and there's still some really cool moments, but he's barely even in the movie aside from just standing around and being rebuilt. That is actually the main storyline, is that a very smart scientist who had been kind of run out of the regular science community gets captured by aliens, again, goddamn aliens, and they're making him rebuild Mechagodzilla so they can continue their conquest from the first movie. Speaking of rehashing things from the first movie, you might see the alien commander and be like, isn't that guy kind of familiar? The same actor played the alien commander in Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, even though he gets shot in the throat and sprays blood everywhere. The same actor is back to play the alien commander, who is, I guess, a different alien commander in this movie, the actor Goro Matsumi. Now, that being said, he does look really villainous, so I really can't blame them for casting him in two different roles in two movies back to back, even though the roles are kind of the same. The English dub they have for him is like a very good, evil, cartoony voice too. I really like his English dub. It's just like a little odd that they two movies back to back decided to make him the same villain, but not the same. It's an odd choice. The aliens in this movie are, I think, supposed to be the same aliens, but we don't really see them do any of the like ape morphing cool prosthetics we saw in the last movie. And instead they have weird silver uniforms and kind of like pointy helmets, and the helmets are like, you know, they're B-movie goodness. I really like the design, but they're nothing special. They're no zillions, but at least they tried to give them some kind of like alien suit designs. That's kind of cool, I guess. The aliens just hate humans, and every time aliens are on Earth, they're trying to come up with a way to wipe them out, and Godzilla just steps in and throws hands immediately. But even with all those good comments about the aliens, the movie is still kind of a drag on the human side. There's some okay acting and some fun little story things, but it's not the most interesting. There's actually a brief montage where they're talking about the other creatures in the universe, and they call Rodan Raiden, basically, and they put Titanosaurus in the same category. This woman that's talking about Titanosaurus, she says, "Oh, I don't want him to be another like destructive kaiju like King Ghidorah." Okay, makes sense. Or Raiden, she means Rodan, but okay, Rodan had his own movie where he killed a lot of people, so okay. And then she's like, or terrible Manda. It's like, what? Manda has been in 5 seconds of a Godzilla movie, Destroy All Monsters, and he's barely even in his own movie, Atragon. So Manda is a hilarious one for them to use. It must have cost them nothing, or I don't know. It's just a very funny choice to say Manda. The disgraced scientist who ends up rebuilding Mechagodzilla has a little bit of like an Astro Boy story going on. His daughter ended up being in a fatal accident, and the aliens kind of manipulated him by helping revive her as a cyborg, and so he's working on her as a robot to keep her alive and feels indebted to the aliens because of that. So I don't know. It's kind of cool if you like Astro Boy, I guess, but they don't really do enough with the story for it to make a meaningful difference. And when it comes to the actual monsters, even Titanosaurus doesn't appear in the movie until the 41-minute mark. So after our opening 10-minute Godzilla recap of the entire Showa era, there's a solid half hour of just human-alien malarkey before we actually even see any other monsters. The final battle, when Godzilla finally does show up, and we've got Mechagodzilla, and we've got Titanosaurus all in the mix, the final battle is okay. There's some really odd filming techniques they tried, like low-angle fights, so we see like from the monsters' bellies up, and they're like boxing each other. It's a little bit bizarre, but you know, whatever. Titanosaurus bites Godzilla on the mouth and like throws him around head to head, and that's kind of a silly scene. It doesn't play nearly as well, especially once we've got over just recently the really brutal, like realistic, bloody scenes of Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla and Godzilla vs. Gigan, where they had really kind of those are the movies where they've completely mastered the Showa fight scene, where the fight scenes are great. You get to see lots of cool things like Gigan having his buzzer, his stomach buzzer, lasers, Mechagodzilla shooting his fingertips. Like, we get to see cool attacks. but it's also like raises the stakes by showing how bloody Godzilla gets and that he's kind of on death's door. And then we cut to this and Titanosaurus is throwing Godzilla around by biting his jaw and flipping him up in the air. It's just a bit of an odd transition to go back to that after we had hit such a nice peak just a movie earlier. But the battles aren't completely without fun. I mean, it's still Mechagodzilla, and we get to see him shoot some lasers and rockets and stuff. And this time, they kill the girl who is controlling Mechagodzilla, and then he just becomes aimless and Godzilla destroys him again. Titanosaurus was also under control by the aliens, and the humans have created some kind of like a sonar thing that basically sets him free of alien control. Titanosaurus goes back into the ocean, never to be seen again, and Godzilla just rolls out of the Showa era a hero. It's an okay movie. I'm gonna recommend Terror of Mechagodzilla, but it's definitely not one of the better ones. It's not bad enough to tell you to stay away from, but the redeeming moments really only come at the end, and the human story does kind of drag. So if you really want to go out on a high note, then finish with Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla. But if you're going through and you're watching each of these films, then yeah, whatever, give it a go. It's not too bad, but it's definitely one of the weaker of the Showa movies, and you can tell that they were really just trying to another way to capitalize off of Mechagodzilla while the property was still hot. Well, everyone, it's been a long ride, but we are done the Showa era. Starting tomorrow, we'll be embarking on the Heisei era, which is the first time the Godzilla films are interconnected. Movies are actually direct sequels to one another, and it's a continuing storyline. And it all kicks off with Godzilla 1984. And I'm really excited to talk about this movie because I've actually seen this movie only a few times in my life, so this is going to be a nice little refresher for me. But I already have some thoughts, and I'm looking forward to going over it again and preparing to talk about it for you guys. But there's still a lot of October left, so thank you so much for tuning in thus far, and stick with me because we're getting into the stuff that has had a lot less North American exposure. Most of the Heisei era was not released here until the late 90s. And I know a lot of you like to hate on Godzilla 1998. We're gonna get there. But because of Godzilla 1998, the popularity allowed these movies to be released for the first time on DVD and Blu-ray here. So you can't hate on Godzilla 1998 yet. Wait for us to get there. But we're embarking on the Heisei era tomorrow, and I'm really looking forward to talking about those movies with you guys. Thank you so much.